My name is Lewis Hamilton. I'm the Dean of the Honors College and also a professor in the History Department here at NJIT. Thank you all for coming to our inaugural DH Showcase. Just as a reminder to everyone, the purpose of the showcase is to introduce our students here to the kind of work being done, this interdisciplinary work being done by our faculty, and to encourage you all to kind of reach out to us if you want to participate in the projects. However, it's my pleasure to introduce my good colleague, Dean Belfield, the Dean of the College of Science and Liberal Arts here, who will introduce the panel. Dean Belfield.
Or perhaps introduce the first panelist, I guess, right? So I want to welcome everyone here. I think this is a marvelous celebration that allows us to bring together a rich, diverse array of people with various interests across disciplines in the college. I've heard about the digital humanities. I'm not a digital humanist. I certainly work in the digital age, and it's been interesting to see that even the humanities have not been immune to the digital age. In fact, the more I began looking at the types of scholarship the faculty are doing here, the digital technologies are really enhancing one's ability to do scholarship and opening up entirely new areas. Dean Hamilton's work employing geographic or geospatial information systems. Imagine that 50 years ago, being able to map devotional spaces in Rome or the Vatican without this kind of technology and what it's availing, the opportunities availing us today. The ability to archive, whether it's patent archives, science archives, architectural archives, the ability to do that and the ability to not only store and archive, but to retrieve this information. In fact, retrieve it on something we carry in our pockets or our purses. This is incredible. And so this is really the digital technologies and the analytical ability to not only record sound, but to analyze sound like Professor Rothenberg does. It's just incredible, the power that we have and the opportunity. So I think the students are especially fortunate here to be able to learn about the efforts that are going on in literature, in philosophy, in history, in architecture, and other areas in this fast evolving area of digital humanities. It's a great opportunity to join in these research projects, to join in the scholarships. This is technology that I think it's worth learning about and worth understanding how it can be employed, because if it can be employed in one discipline, we know it's got applications in many other disciplines, regardless what area you're studying. So with that, I just want to welcome you again and thank the faculty and thank students here and guests for attending this showcase of digital humanities. It's my pleasure to welcome to the stage distinguished Professor David Rothenberg from the Department of Humanities. Please, David.
So you can find my presentation. My name is David Rothenberg. I'm a professor in the Humanities Department. Okay, so in the Humanities Department at a place like NJIT, you could do all kinds of crazy things. Like mostly I spend my time playing music with animals and understanding the music of different animal creatures. And so I've recently been studying nightingales in Berlin. This is the nightingale. And this bird is so interesting because they sing hundreds of different songs. All right, so the nightingales in Berlin, they're very territorial. Each one is like on a neighboring tree. They fly to Africa in the winter. They come back every spring to the same tree. And each one knows different amounts of songs, between like 50 and 200. Can we play this? It's a video. And then they each know 150 different sounds, a kind of a sonogram that scientists use to represent these sounds. And you can traditionally represent like one sound at a time. And but in general, when scientists are studying these things, they felt like a song like the nightingale is too complicated to really study, and that we should, there's no way to make sense of whether it's even musical in any form. And so maybe 15 years ago, I wrote a book called Why Birds Sing, and I asked scientists, could you possibly investigate the musicality of birds? And this one lab at a City College, and now Hunter College, with Ofer Chernikovsky, said, yeah, we can do that, and we can figure out how to look at huge amounts of birdsong data in one picture. We can analyze much more data than ever previously done. And so this is a vision of our project. We'll see if it works. This scientist there, Christina Roske, is now in Germany at a place called the Max Planck Institute for Empirical Aesthetics. They actually study empirical aesthetics there. She figured out how to look at a lot of Nightingale songs at once. We won't be able to hear them, but you can see, you take these sonograms and reduce them into single lines where the blue is silence and red is like loud. And so of that, you can kind of abstract them and move it down and have one picture with hundreds, if not 6,000 songs in one picture. So this is the bringing of big data to the analysis of bird music. That's what we got here. And so they're all like organized, trying to categorize them, and this is the order in which they were sung, the next picture. And then we tried to figure out, when the birds are moving from one phrase to another, do they have any idea what they're doing? And some birds are very organized, and some are kind of completely random. And she spent years analyzing all this data. This is how you're moving from one phrase to the next. And she was kind of frustrated at the time, saying most birds sound like they're pretty random, except they can't be, because then how would they be? Why would they be doing all this? There must be some secret order she couldn't find. Another study by other scientists. Again, this is like, it's very scientific, but it's a kind of musical question. Like, do the birds know what they're doing? Different kind of network analysis showed that there are, my favorite is this, the analysis of orderly birds and disorderly birds. That some of them are random, but others sort of go in the same kind of order. And then lately, Tina and her team in Germany have concluded something that she finally found there was something to conclude from all this, which I can't play to you, but the idea that the nightingales are going boo, 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 really fast sounds. They do it in an irregular regularity, similar to someone who's playing music and knows what they're doing. Like if you look at like the Earl King by Schubert, if you're going to play that piano part, you can't totally be like a machine. Even if you're playing techno music, you're going to program humanity into it, so it's not exactly in between. Anyway, don't think I'm a scientist. Mostly I play music with these birds. And so I recently, in April, I have a project. There's a lot of music. This you can already listen to online, every streaming service. Nightingales in Berlin. Here's the book. And I'm going to talk about it 2:30 p.m. March 17th in the Humanities department. You're going to hear and see all this stuff, so then you can learn more. So thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Allison Lefkowitz.
I'm Elizabeth Petrick. I'm assistant professor of history.
And we are presenting the Annotated Digital Patent History Archive. And we decided that this would be an interesting project for us for a couple reasons. The first was to provide a more dynamic way to think about the history of patents than what was currently available, which was mostly either the very legal documents that people have to put in to earn a patent, protection of their invention from the federal government, and those are pretty arcane documents. They're hard to read and understand, or the sort of high legal exploration of those. So we thought that this archive would be something that would be both more comprehensive than an individual case study of one invention or one institution, and also more understandable to a much broader audience of students, of legal scholars, of practitioners, and even someone just looking to invent something. The other reason we wanted to take on this project is to provide students in history an opportunity for research, that generally historians work on their own, and this is just a characteristic of the field. And this is unusual here at NJIT, so we started brainstorming ways that we could get students more involved in research in a way that would fit NJIT student interests. So this is the website we came up with. You can definitely check it out. It's patenthistory.org. This is the front end that we were able to develop thanks to a seed grant from NJIT. And you can see here that you can explore a little bit just based on this field, but that you can explore by inventor name, you can explore by field of study. So you can look at all the inventions that physicists have come up with in our archive, or you can look up all the inventions that biologists have come up with in our archive. Also category, and you can keyword search as well. But this is really the sort of beta version of the project, and I will let my colleague talk about more present and also the future of the project.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, you can see on the right there, this is a sample essay that a student has written. This was part of a class assignment. So that's what is made available. If we could scroll down, but this is just a screenshot. We like to incorporate images from the patents into the essays. So basically people can read about these inventions, learn about them, and see what makes them tick and why they're important. On the back end, it's not nearly as flashy. If you're familiar at all with WordPress, you notice this looks like a pretty typical WordPress template, but it gives us a way of entering all this data. So we collect all this metadata about patents, such as the location that they're assigned, the date that they're assigned, the date they were filed, and we've got this great collection of metadata that right now is just displayed, but we have kind of grand plans for the future of what we might be able to do with this data. To give you an idea of what is available right now, these are the patent essays. Sorry, the text is so small, but we're growing, so that's good. These are almost all patents that have come out of NJIT research. And we did that deliberately to give ourselves a bit of a case study to play with. So we have a number of courses that we teach where we offer this as an assignment that students can do, that they can write one of these essays. Like I mentioned, we started with NJIT patents. We also have a few guest patents. We did have a collaboration with some academics at other universities that run a podcast called Sexing History, and they wrote us a wonderful essay on a bust enhancement patent. It is. And we have other kinds of ones that we're still trying to put into the archive that students have written. We're trying to do a feature on patents that have come out of Newark, because Newark has been historically this fantastic center for innovation. So we have a bunch of future plans of what we want to do with this project. One is to do, since we have a lot of patents that are in certain ways related, either come out of Newark, come out of NJIT, or have to do with certain kinds of technologies. Allison did a class project on patents related to sex and gender, so we've got a group of those that we'd like to upload. So we want to do these kind of theme groups so that you could go into the archive and read a bunch of different essays on patents that fall under some theme and get some then feel for the larger category. We also have collaboration with other institutions. We have someone at UC Davis that we're working with, so he's trying to get students in his classes to write these essays and contribute to our archive. And then we want to do some really cool stuff with data visualization, and this is grand plans that we have to team up with some of our colleagues here in informatics. We'd like to do something like a map of patent locations within our archive, so you can see where innovation is happening. We want to do various kinds of network visualization, so you would be able to trace things like how people collaborate with each other, who inventors work with. Do we see that as an actual network of collaboration? And then a kind of far-flung plan is collaboration of how patents cite each other, how patents build upon each other to see how innovation grows over time. And then we even want to do maybe an offshoot that we've talked about with some other faculty members here of the entire patent database is this fantastic example of big data. It has about 10 million entries, and nobody's ever done anything with it. It just sits there in a government database. And we want to take that data and maybe build some of these visualization tools that we can start to understand really what innovation looks like in the US. And we are out of time. So that's our grand plans and what it looks like now. If you're interested, talk to us. Thank you.
My name is Maya Griffiths. I'm director of the Littman Library.
And my name is Danielle Rey. I'm the Digital Scholarship Technology Manager at Drew University, but formerly of NJIT at the Littman Library.
The project that we present today is the Digital Archive of Newark Architecture, and URL, if you want to visit, it's dana.njit.edu. It is a project conceived to preserve the history of the built environment of Newark. It applies technology to make resources scattered throughout different collections more generally accessible. Initially created as support the curriculum of the School of Architecture, over the time it have grown into gateway that provide access to information about physical life of New York, its architecture, infrastructure, public art, open spaces. It's visually provide access and consolidates materials in a variety of formats, hundreds of maps, drawing, architectural photographs, video recording, and text. It also incorporates resources already available online. Initially, it was created in Site Studio as a series of the static web pages, but later it has been migrated into a Mecca environment. This migration allowed to increase user access through searchable database with advanced search options, and also allows for browsing via tags and via interactive map. The discovery was also enhanced by linking related records. For example, on the left side, you will see the record of Frederick Law Elmsted, and on the right, it's linked to the Branch Brook Park. It also can be linked from other park designed by Olmsted in Newark. Moving to Mecca also helped to increase productivity by working collaboratively through the back-end interface. It's easy to add materials or make changes with instantaneous updates. Dana is constantly growing, and you can see currently it contains 11 collections. For more creative presentation of archival materials, we added online exhibition option. It also helped to construct a narrative. Crowdsourcing option allows general public to submit their materials online. And using ArcGIS helps to visualize and analyze data in a totally different way. We work in collaboration with New York Museum, with New York Public Library and City Archives, and we added, over the time, we added numerous maps, and recently we reached agreement with New York Public, and we added a collection of photographs from their Burke collection. And now Danielle will talk more specifically about it.
Yeah, so in addition to working on the data website, we also focused on developing a mobile application for both Android and iOS. This was done in partnership with our computer science graduate student and Dana programmer, Darpshar Kasharia. And we were able to develop this first iteration of the Dana app, which leveraged location awareness to provide information about Newark's built environment to users based on their proximity to buildings, historic districts, and monumental public art, in the hopes of connecting the community to Newark's rich historical tradition. So here you can see, to further these aims, we continue to work in collaboration with Newark Public Library and reached an agreement to include their historic photos from the Samuel Berg collection. We created a sample tour in the app, which provides a thematic pathway for users to navigate through those locations proximal to our campus. So you can kind of see how striking some of the changes at NJIT have been from the late 50s to the mid-1960s to locations that you can see today, specifically to these kinds of areas that are adjacent to campus. The app itself gives the user the opportunity to select either the map with markers for historically significant landmarks or points of interest, or select tours, which offer highlighted routes through particular collections or building types.
Since its inception, it became a very actively used tool for research and teaching. It generated interest among scholars and general public alike. And according to the Google Analytics, it's being accessed not only from the US, but from other countries as well. Dana is work in progress and constantly growing. If you're interested in this, we are planning to add test mobile application, continue research in collaboration with local institutions, adding more content. Thank you.
Hi, it's me again. So I'm going to zip through this really quickly. Forgive me for reading, but I don't trust myself to abide by the 5-minute time. So again, I'm Danielle Rey, Digital Scholarship Technology Manager at Drew University. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about an image matching project that I worked on in terms of bookplates. So since the advent of the printing press, bookplates, the labels that are affixed to the inside cover or end paper of a book, have been used to mark the ownership of text, signal characteristics of their proprietor, and stand as work of graphic art and design in their own right. This project uses image analysis techniques to explore and match book plates contained in titles in the HathiTrust Digital Library, a large-scale collaborative repository of millions of books digitized from partner academic institutions. The goal is to enhance scholarly access to book plates, which have limited discoverability, and surface potential research opportunities and connections between bibliography, book history, graphic arts, and beyond. So the study and collecting of book plates, also known as ex libris, the Latin for from the library of, blossomed in the late 19th and 20th centuries. This period saw the advent of the Ex Libris Society, its associated journal, as well as numerous publications aiding in the study and identification of book plates. Much in the same way Ex Libris fascinated turn-of-the-century bibliophiles, book plates now reside in many institutional special collections and serve as research material for the lay enthusiast and scholar alike. Some of the earliest known book plates date back to the 15th century, and as printed books became more abundant, it became important to distinguish editions with name labels or book plates. Stylistically, early book plates were often armorial or heraldic in nature, incorporating the patron's coat of arms and Latin assertions of ownership as a means of identification. Other iconographic tropes are also present, such as pictorial styles related to Jacobean or Chippendale decorative classification, or, as you can see here, references to mythological ornamentation, such as that of Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom, who is usually distinguished by the presence of the owl. In the earliest 20th century, book plates get more distinctive and decorative and very imaginative, and were at times produced through collaboration of the patron and the book plate artist. This is the case with the book plates of Novecento architect Giovanni Muzio, which appear in several early works on architecture in various states, as you can see here, with and without text, overlapping with other book plates, or half-ripped. This example was selected and included in the test analysis set because of the known, multiple, and varying examples of the book plate, as well as for its ability to demonstrate the significance of connecting multiple titles once united as a personal collection or private library. And from a research perspective, it's really interesting to see how an architect like Muzio's book collection signifies that he had contact with the foundational literature of art and architecture. So my aim was to explore these book plates in the aggregate across collections, libraries, and institutions with an eye towards reconstituting libraries, exploring visual tropes, and eventually puzzling out some identification challenges. The vast digital corpus of materials included in this library is uniquely positioned for the kind of work because it unites these disparate materials into a collaborative collection. So while there are challenges associated with locating, retrieving, and analyzing this type of data, book plates can serve as an appropriate pilot because they usually uniformly appear relatively consistently in a digitized book's page image sequence. So much in the same way as initiatives like Pharos use image analysis to consolidate and correlate photo archive images, this data set could also help test the feasibility of similar applications to book plates. And it's also a perennial question among special collections and libraries alike. So this pilot project used the second and third page image sequence in the HathiTrust Digital Library for titles that were cataloged with art and architectural classifications. They were downloaded, then classified through a modification of TensorFlow, an open source machine learning library, to obtain vector representations of images. Then, using a nearest neighbor script, created one out file for each image in the collection. Each out file then identifies the top 30 images most similar to the given image, about around 1,500 final images. And the relative success of this depends somewhat on the plate itself. As you can see with the Giovanni Muzio plates, where's my little scroll? It does a relatively good job of matching the image book plates. With marbled end papers, some of them turn up in terms of like the way that this marbling and pattern is styled. Where you get into some trouble is when there's a book plate and an end paper. So you can see that, again, it's detecting some of that diagonal striation, but not necessarily doing a really good job of matching the book plates itself. So to conclude, I just want to talk a little bit about future directions in terms of edge detection, perhaps eliminating color and analyzing these on grayscale. And then I'd also like a better way to go through this data because it's a bit of a slog just to spot check individual book plates. And I want to also give additional thanks to Matt Schwartz, who helped me with the initial page scrape, Doug Duhame, who kind of walked me through the TensorFlow tutorial, and Alex Minicozy, who helped me parse out some of the JSON. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's so wonderful to hear about what everyone's working on. I'm going to talk to you today about a collaborative project that I'm doing with a community, a Xavante indigenous community in central Brazil, a colleague at Emory University, and a colleague at Fiocruz in Rio de Janeiro. This is a project that draws on the book that I'm writing. I'm writing a book about what it would be like, how do you understand what it would be like to host and be studied by scientists over and over and over again. There are indigenous communities in Brazil that have hosted many scientists, and as a historian of science, I'm interested in the interactions between those scholars who go to those communities and the people who live there. What is it like to constantly be visited and studied? Here, this is a map to show you where we're talking about in central Brazil. You can see the state of Mato Grosso, and then you can see the officially recognized Xavante territories of central Brazil. And communities throughout these territories have often hosted scientists. I work in one community particularly, and here you can see a partial list of the scientists who have gone to this community since the 1950s to do research. There's tons of them. So can you imagine constantly receiving people who want to ask you questions about how you live and why you live that way? They want to measure you, they want to take blood samples, they want to ask you about your health history, and they're going to document it as well. And they're going to take photographs, and they're going to do audio recordings. This creates an enormous archive of information about this community, about the village of Pimentel Barbosa. But those archives are dispersed. They're spread out with all of the scientists all over who go back to the countries where they live or go back to the cities in Brazil where they're from. So when I started working on the history of these scientific interactions, I was interested in whether or not my research could be really useful or pertinent to the community, one of the communities that has been studied. And in talking to elders from that community about my curiosity about the history of science, what I heard from them is that they're curious about it too, because they know that they've been studied, but they don't have access to all of these materials that have been created about them. And so they asked me if, within my research, it would be possible for me to work on returning some of those materials. But that is not an entirely simple thing to do. So we're working on putting together a digital archive that includes materials like this photograph. This is Apuwen Xavante. He was a famous leader, a very prominent leader, but he was also a famous human subject. He was studied in the 1950s, in the 1960s, in the 1970s, and here you can see anthropometric photographs that were created of him as part of a human genetics research program, and you can see that he's got a number hung around his neck. And these are images that are part of a longer process of trying to understand human diversity, biological diversity, through a kind of racial typology. And so that raises a lot of problematic histories that's connected to ideas about eugenics and connected to ideas about categorizing humans in a hierarchy. And so dealing with these materials then involves a lot of sensitivity. It also involves sensitivity. Even if you are to edit an image like this image of Apuwen, it involves sensitivity because Xavante have particular ways of managing knowledge and sensitivities around people who have passed away. So it's a cultural norm not to speak the name of someone who has passed away. And I choose Apuwen for this example because he's famous and he's often talked about, and so therefore it's normalized to say his name and also to represent him visually. But this is something that raises a lot of challenges and is not something that people in the community necessarily want everyone to have access to. So We're working with a platform called Mukatu, and we're right at the beginning because we're still working out a lot of these kind of ethical issues that are at the core of this project. But we're working with a platform that was developed specifically for Indigenous knowledge, specifically to protect that knowledge so that it's not universally available to anyone who wants to access it, but it's made available on a limited basis to people within the community or people beyond the community who the community grants access to that information. And so it gives opportunity for members of Pimentel Barbosa to control what's seen and who sees it and how they see it. And so the next step, I'm looking for somebody who might be interested in working on this project as a research assistant, and also we'll be doing a series of community consultation in central Brazil in July of this year. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for being here today. Real quickly, could I get a show of hands who are honors undergraduate students? Is that most of the room? Fantastic. So I'm a relatively new professor here in informatics, and my specialty is in AI. Currently, I'm teaching what I call creative AI, and we use some creative, or we do some creative things like, I'll throw out these names that might not mean anything, but we use a technology that you see with like NVIDIA's face generation. So you're creating all these different faces that never existed. We don't have access to maybe that kind of equipment to make NVIDIA faces, but we're doing things with transferring style from well-known images into, say, the image of a particular artist. Anyway, so I just wanted to plug my class a little bit. But so maybe consider taking it or taking a look. And it's in the informatics department. Oops. I got it. So a little bit about me is that my PhD is in computer science. I have a math degree and another couple of CS degrees. I'm originally from the University of Central Florida, academically speaking. And my research has focused, from this AI perspective, has focused primarily on music and sound generation historically, and I've gotten pretty into video games, which you can make a career out of. So I've gotten pretty into video games recently, but I think that it's important to follow your passion with your research. And this is a picture of me with my advisor after graduating. And so this is part of my dissertation work that I'm interested in continuing on. And so this image itself, 5 minutes isn't enough time, unfortunately, to really fully explain this. But this image is illustrating that we can use functions. We can conceive of music as functions of time, so the patterns of pitches and durations as functions of time. And when we do that, we enable ourselves to then create functions. Oh, well, so for example, if you have, say, a Beatles song with a vocal part, a bass part, a guitar part, a drum part, you can think of each one of these as a function of time, and that these are functionally related to one another. So when you're hearing the integration of these different pieces, these are, okay, still have half my time. These are functions of each other, and so we can use those functions to then generate music, analyze music as well. Something else I've been working on and is a relatively newer project that I've started with Professor David Rothenberg is this itself is older. This is from 2015, but generating sounds as well. So generating sounds with AI, and we are working on currently designing an iPad instrument that would create its own sounds rather than using sound libraries from, say, something like Logic or GarageBand. So I'm going to skip over this. This is something that I have done previously, but working on helping people facilitate their creativity in different domains. This is trying to help people spatially with their creativity and diagrammatic thinking. And so, like I said, right now I am working on games and sound. So I focused a little bit on the sound and music side of this for this presentation, but I have a large group of students right now who are also investigating different aspects of Hearthstone. And I've been arguing, I just had a journal paper accepted arguing for using Hearthstone in general AI research. And so currently I just looked on my phone, there's a URI application you may already be familiar with. It's $3,000, I think, for working on projects over the summer, and I would be very interested in working with you on Hearthstone or sound and music projects. Thank you.
My name is Gabrielle S Pretty. I am an associate professor in the College of Architecture and Design, and I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues. In 2018, the Getty Research Institute launched a new digital humanities initiative inviting 5 teams of historians and computer scientists to help develop a research platform for an important photographic archive. We were asked to undertake discrete studies of Ed Ruscha's Streets of Los Angeles collection as a way of testing and guiding the archive's functionality, as well as its, sort of more broadly, its scholarly utility and significance. In the 1960s, Ed Ruscha emerged as one of the leading practitioners of the West Coast response to the pop art scene based in New York. From his earliest canvases, Ruscha was inspired by consumer culture as manifest in the built environment. But the artist books he produced beginning in 1963 took a more conceptual approach to everyday landscapes as he photographed quotidian structures and spaces like like gas stations and parking lots with what he described as deadpan neutrality or objectivity. In 1966, his Every Building on the Sunset Strip monumentalized the everyday landscape of what was then the center of LA's nightlife and club scene, in a book consisting of a 25-foot-long accordion fold, which you see here, with 2 continuous photographic strips depicting buildings on the north and south sides of Sunset Boulevard as it passed through West Hollywood, as we might perceive it from gazing through the passenger windows of a moving vehicle. Having perfected a way of capturing what we might call mobilized vision with a flatbed truck, a fixed tripod, and 100-foot-long bulk-loaded rolls of 35mm film, Ruscha kept on shooting, eventually recording every building on the entire length of Sunset Boulevard, as well as almost 24 other streets in Los Angeles, photographing them again and again every few years. What Ruscha has ultimately produced can be described as something akin to a Google Street View before there was a Google Street View. And though he's been notoriously vague about why he keeps adding to the Streets of Los Angeles project, which he still continues to do, it is clear that at some point, his purely artistic agenda became something else. It was superseded by an interest in urban documentation. This mirrors my own efforts to use his archive, which I'm just beginning at this point, as a way of tracking stasis and change in the built environment of Los Angeles, particularly in the way that it records attenuated urbanism in the continuous streetscapes, some of which you see here. When the Getty acquired this living archive in 2013, it consisted mainly of negatives developed but never printed, some cut into strips, but most of them rolled into motion picture film canisters. And eventually these added up to almost 1 million images, individual images, which the Getty began digitizing as a place of infinitely deep pockets, which they began digitizing with this sort of steampunk setup that you see in the lower slides there. Since January of this year, project researchers, including myself, have had access to approximately 150,000 images and rudimentary metadata that we can view as Ruscha and his team shot them, roll by roll or strip by strip, or, as we see here, which is much more important for my own research, with the images keyed to approximate geolocations and viewable chronologically, which is what you're seeing here, that is, with every image included in the archive of that specific location. So you see the chronology going along the right there, or keyed to approximate geolocations and viewable by building, which is what you see running along the lower level there. Viewable building by building for the particular shoot in that particular year. And I should note that I'm also including a screenshot of the page spread from the original building, the original book in 1966, sort of so you can compare the kind of static and the, that which is also static as you're seeing it here, but which in essence allows you to move through the physical street of the city. Now, even in this beta version, it is extremely easy to fall down the digital rabbit hole watching the built landscape of Los Angeles sort of evolve over the years, notably along Sunset and Hollywood Boulevard, which are the most fully documented. Evolving over the years from low-rise and scattered development to kind of increasing in density. But in order to, in effect, begin to extract data from these archived images, which I will undertake working with Damon Crockett, a machine visioning and data visualization specialist at Yale University's Lens Media Lab, my initial and fundamental task is to develop a descriptive system that is specifically indexed to Los Angeles. Here, I am beginning to borrow from any number of existing models, both outmoded, like Bannister-Fletcher's History of Architecture on the Comparative Method, which you see on the upper left, to iconic, like Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown's Signs of Life, which you see an illustration of on the lower left, which is an elevation analysis using speech balloons, as well as a number of others. Ultimately, completing this comes down to establishing an architectural and urban taxonomy that is precisely calibrated to the spatial morphologies and typologies of 20th century Los Angeles, which I will hopefully accomplish by building on the semantic metadata that I've already established for SAH Archipedia, which consists of styles and buildings, styles and periods, building types and materials that we established for this resource utilizing our existing glossaries as well as the vocabularies, the art and architecture thesaurus of Getty Research Institute itself. The Getty AAT, and let me just conclude with this, the Getty AAT has long been, the Research Institute has long made it available for cataloging and research purposes. But its high-style Eurocentrism has proven problematic for applications dealing with non-canonical and American buildings. In other words, buildings precisely like the ones we see here, which are documented in Ed Ruscha's Streets of Los Angeles project. So as I devise this urban grammar for analyzing this project, I will also be contributing to the original resource itself. Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to my presentation. This is research I'm working with one of my colleagues back at Kent State University. And we almost get this grant funded by National Science Foundation because last time, among the over 200 proposals, only 10 proposals were ranked high priority. We are ranked on the 10th and didn't get the money because of limited of grant, the grant. We will try again. So what we do is we utilize now the list documents from the documentation center from Cambodia. It's about the mass genocide under the Khmer Rouge from 1975 to 1979. If you have read history, it's a dark history in the Asia. It's about 1/4 of people died under the Khmer Rouge. And in Khmer Rouge, there's a famous kind of security center called S21. Khmer Rouge, during his period, established about 200 such security centers. And the S21 is the most famous one because it arrested many they think is significant enemies of the party who were against of the state. And most of them were killed. And through collaboration with the Documentation Center of Cambodia, we retrieved most of these kind of the confessions and the records. So because for a long time, when you study this kind of mass violence, people question how trustworthy what this confession is. Because you know, when these people were arrested, they will be tortured. And the confession think it's not trustworthy. So now but when we read through the confessions, we find out they definitely confess and many other people's names. They will ask you what time in where and what time KGB recruited you, and when and like the spy from United States recruited you. Then they put all these into records. So we want to see whether this will map into a spatial and social network to let us to better understand how the genocide was carried out systematically. So look at all these, no one survived in this kind of the wall of all these pictures. People get killed in S21. And we get about 4,000 complete conversions from security center. And if you look at by the people name mentioned in the conversion, there's over like 8,000 people. And look at their duration of detainment. It means is how many days they stay after they still alive. So majority of them 0 day means they killed within 24 hours. So if you just based on the logic is a long tail, it definitely is a long tail, but you see some spikes, right? Something jump, a little bit jump. Why several people, a group of people, the party think it's still useful for keep them for a while, then kill them. So these patterns will point to some reasons why they were kept. And we also began to, based on the documents, we look into where they were arrested. And this, where they were arrested for the execution. And this is another very striking feature, how to say, kind of picture. What does that mean is if you look at the X means the date of arrest. The Y axis means how many days they were arrested, stay in the prison. The logical thing is if you see the lines more linked towards X, it means more people will stay longer. But if it becomes steeper and steeper, if let's say it's a line just vertical to the X, that means all the people arrested on that day will be killed on the same day. So when time moves from left to right, you see it become a little bit more and more steeper. And also it's systematically that prison was emptied actually, right? When you reach a certain date, people gone. Then you arrest another group of people, kill again. So, and we look into every conversions, get their names, look at match name. Definitely there's some kind of the topic of, how to say, the text mining thing inside. We need to make sure there's some common names used in Cambodian, and also some name is very strange. We also need to figure out. But anyway, we build a social network among the conversions. And we look at who confers who, and who are the most important person in the network. Yeah, so so this is, we are now further move on, is we want to use this to building a dialogue between humanities scholars and computational scientists. Especially, we are not only using this for Cambodia's mass genocide. We also work with some collaborators from South America. We know there's quite a few military governments in South America, and during that time, many young people disappeared at home, arrested by secret police, but now all the documents are gradually released. We also want to look into the similar documents. Thank you.
All right, so thank you all for coming. And so I think a large number of the members of NJIT members of the Rome Research Group are here right now. If you can put up your hands, I know I can see a couple of you. Don't be ashamed. It's good work. All right. So just very quickly, obviously that's the theme. Very quickly, this is the Rome Research Group. I'm Professor Hamilton from the History Department, also Dean of the Honors College. That's my day job. And the Rome Research Group is examining a kind of sacred art in the streets of the city of Rome. And so on the slide here, you see at the lower left-hand corner of the side, you see a kind of very contemporary piece of street art from the artist Malpal, famous Roman artist Malpal. And then upper right-hand corner, you can just see there a shrine to the Madonna, an image of the Madonna, a sacred image. And that image there is typical of these images in the city, which are mostly there as reminders to prayer and kind of blessings on the site. They serve to kind of create a kind of a sacrality to the streets of Rome, to kind of try to turn the city of Rome into a sacred city. At the heart of this project, though, is a geographic database of over 587 shrines, of exactly 587 shrines, mapping the shrines. And it's the largest database of the shrines in the city. It's larger than the city of Rome's database of the shrines. I'm just going to say that. And it is organized here chronologically. So you can by date of origin of the shrines. In the upper left-hand corner of that slide, you can see just a very small image of one of the more popular shrines, and you can see the kind of devotion we're able to track. That's mostly votive plaques on the walls, pasted on the walls there around the shrine for a prayer answered, flowers, candles, and even in that particular case, inserted prayers into the database. So most of the work of the group is building and maintaining that database. But the database has had some interesting research results. The first thing it allowed us to do is challenge the historiography, so what previous scholarship had said around the origins of the shrines. So the previous scholarship had suggested that the shrines originated in antiquity, and our database helped underscore the unlikelihood of that they're really a 13th century phenomena in the city of Rome. The database, as I said, or maybe I haven't said this yet, but the database is the only database that actively tracks devotion at the shrines. And so if you filter out for the shrines by by shrines that have active devotion at them, you begin to learn certain things about patterns of devotion within the city and religiosity within the city. And so in this image here, you get to see the large number of shrines that have devotion at them. And if you control for shrines that have that are set up in such a way to allow us to actually measure the devotion, it's a very high percentage of those shrines that have devotion at them. That counters kind of narratives or modifies narratives about secularization in the city of Rome and in Italy in general, and that these shrines seem to be more of a vernacular religion that has a kind of stronger place in the society than necessarily church attendance, which is a typical measure of devotion. One of the other things that interesting and surprising things that we discovered last year in our work is that there's a kind of inverse relationship between the artistic recognition the site gets and the amount of devotion it attracts. So once a site is restored, quote unquote restored, or otherwise recognized somehow as high art by the city superintendency, it seems to depress devotion at the site. And so moving forward, hopefully this summer we'll work with colleagues in informatics to begin to explore how people respond differently to sites that are restored versus sites that they weren't restored. That's the same site on the left and the right of that image there from 2015 when it was a pretty skivose little alleyway to 2016 when it turned into this kind of Renaissance fantasy there. The current group, two scholars currently are working on what's called diffusion analysis here with Professor Yi, whom you just heard from, in informatics. And there we've had some interesting results as well, to kind of analyzing how other building patterns in the city may or may not reflect the creation of the shrines. And so one of the things we've learned here this semester very quickly is that certain workshops working in the city of Rome, so certain stonemasons working in the city of Rome, actually seem to have a similar social network to the social network that helped establish the shrines in the 13th and 14th century. So there's an interesting set of social patterns there as well. We'll continue to work with colleagues in informatics there to kind of further develop that analysis this summer as well. All right? Thank you.
Hello again. My name is Maya Griffiths.
And I'm Augustus Wendell from the College of Architecture and Design.
Our project is an attempt to achieve a multidimensional reconstruction of a theater building designed by French architect Thomas de Tamon in Odessa, now Ukraine, at the beginning of the 19th century. Our goal is to reconstruct the structure virtually, to analyze it as an element of urban environment, and to recreate an immersive experience by integrating techniques of virtual reality and audio simulation. To explain our choice, let me briefly provide some background information. Odessa was founded in 1794 as a port on the Black Sea in the territory called New Russia. Already during the first decades of its existence, under the administration of the French immigrant Duc de Richelieu, it has become the fastest growing city of the time, often called the eighth wonder of the world. Its rapidly growing population, mostly immigrants, spoke at least a dozen of languages. The theater, one of the first buildings constructed during Richelieu administration, in 1809 became the city's major attraction. Located on the high hill above the port, it created a striking picture for the visitors approaching Odessa from the sea, making their first impression of the city really spectacular. Built according to the latest development in architectural history and theory, architectural theory and practice, it was recognized as one of the most accomplished neoclassical theater construction of the time. It was designed to accommodate 800 visitors, while the total population of the city at the time was approximately 11,000. It soon became the desirable destination for musical troupes, and already during the first 9 months since its opening, it housed more than 100 performances conducted in various languages. Unfortunately, the theater life wasn't too long. On the New Year's Eve of 1872, the malfunctioning gas lighting fixture caused the fire and destroyed the building. However, architects' original drawings that are preserved in both in France and in Russia, paintings of the time, engraving, postcards, and memoirs of contemporaries were used as the main resources for our attempt to virtually reconstruct this lost monument. Professor Vendel's students, Anisha Khandakar, if she's here, I don't know, she created this a view of Odessa from the sea, and another student, Professor Vendel, Jerry Bellone, recreated a view, a virtual model of the theater interior. And Augustus is going to talk more about the technical aspect of this project.
So we wanted to simulate the idea of user experience since this was a theater, and in order to do that, we needed to first tackle the issue of what you saw and how to simulate the visual. So again, Jerry Bellone built a 3D model of the interior of the space for us, and this allowed us to simulate the visual experience of the theater from numerous points, from the upper tier balconies to the lower step seating, to capture all the different user experiences for the different constituencies from the city that would attend the theater here. From our research and our firsthand accounts as theater attendees, we know that the visual experience is only one part of the user experience, and an equally important part is the sound of the space, both from the performance and the impact of architecture on the sound and the selection of the score performed, which was critical in Odessa, where scores from all over Europe were being brought in, and even the audible din of the crowd with all the languages that were being spoken in Odessa at that time. So we used in order to hear the space and to simulate this, we used a real-time spatialized audio processing, something that would allow you, depending on where you are in the model, to hear the effect of the architecture, of the repercussions of the clouding and obscuring of the architecture on the sound of the performance and of the fellow participants. We are running out of time. We built an HTC Vive-based Unity 3D simulation, a VR simulation, so you could move through the space, and you could be hearing the immersive audio and the spatialized audio as you're moving through the space, and there are a few screenshots here. So a very rough, abstract model at this point, but you could move around the model, move into different locations in this point, an upper tier balcony, and depending on where you were, the sound changed because it was being clouded and obscured by the architecture and the quality of the openings in the space. And that's a view looking back. We also have in the middle of the theater space there controls for the score. So I think we loaded 3 scores that were relevant for the time into the simulation so that you can choose in the simulation what you're hearing. And this is Burchek and myself trying it out. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you all for being here. And my name is Burchek Özlüdil. I'm the interim associate dean at the Honors College, and also I work at the College of Architecture and Design. I'm an architect and architectural historian by training, and I work at the intersection of architectural and urban history, medical history, psychiatric history to be specific, and digital computational tools. So, as you can see from the title, I'm going to talk to you about insane asylums today. So I think we all have a conception of mental hospitals, especially historical ones. And depending on where we grew up, this might change a little bit, but it's typically dark, possibly haunted, and populated with mistreated patients, evil nurses, and evil doctors. And the image that accompanies that is probably something like this, right? These are two examples, one from New Jersey in Trenton, the other is from New York. And this is really a typical 19th century insane asylum. And it is built as an insane asylum, and it conveys a certain message. But what I will talk about instead are hospitals or asylums that are not purpose-built. So these are repurposed buildings actually, so these repurposed buildings actually made up of a significant portion of insane asylums in the 19th century. And I do work personally, specifically on asylums in the Ottoman Empire, so now Turkey, in the 19th century. And one of my main arguments is that in the absence of extensive documentation and conventional formal readings, as you would do, like in a building like this, right? It's precisely through the changing of the spaces and time that one can demonstrate the modernization and changing of medical practices. And this is actually coming from the conviction of the time that asylums themselves were instrumental in the healing process of mental illness. It was assumed at the time that the life and routines of patients were crucial components of the healing process, and that was done through a certain reorganization of space and time. And this basically entailed organizing the medical routines, as well as the daily life. So when I say daily life, I mean like eating, sleeping, exercising, anything that you can think of, that obviously these are very well regulated in an asylum. So in order to think, analyze, and demonstrate these connections, as a team, we built a platform in Unity 3D that is a gaming platform to be able to conduct temporal-spatial analysis. So these are the features that the platform provides, and I'm going to walk you through them. So the first one is what we call a temporal dimension, or changes over time. So what this means is by implementing a visual timeline slider component in Unity 3D, we control the visibility of architectural changes at distinct time periods. And this actually gives us a look into the life of the building and how it changed over time. But we can also browse these changes in first person, because this is a gaming platform, which brings us closer to the experience of its inhabitants. And so here we are inside the female section, the women's courtyard. We just solved the same change of the perspectival view. Now we're seeing it in first person, and we're looking around this courtyard, still in the female section. And this happens like in 1895, to be exact. And so we coordinate all this information through this basic platform via a database. So now we're going to see is I'm going to call an image that is exactly that same corner. And so this feature we've been calling cross-referencing data, or also spatial data management. So we have a model, like we have the 3D model, that has all the information about itself. It knows when it was built, it knows what it is. And we also have a database that ties everything together when a query is made. And it's really through the same database that users can browse information, like you see on the left. They can add notes and browse others' notes. And it's like these annotations are stored and retrieved through the same spatial data management system. And I do want to note that the platform was built as a flexible solution. So I'm showing you the prototype, which is the Insane Asylum, but anyone who has a project can actually use this platform to plug in their projects and use these same features. And so I'm going to invite Augustus here, and he's going to talk about how populating and tracing movements within a space enriches our understanding of any space, really, but we're specifically going to talk about the same Insane Asylum. And I'm just going to end with the Spatio Scholar team members. So it's myself, Augustus, Bo Thompson, who did the unit development, and Karen Jaremko, who did the database and abstraction. Thank you very much.
So we're building on this same asylum, the Toptashi Asylum. And the Toptashi Asylum, and in particular the arrangement of and changes to the building form over time, are critically engaged with the asylum occupants. The arrangement of space reflected contemporary evolving thinking on the use of space for medical treatment, meaning the way both patients and physicians occupied and moved through the asylum reflected thoughts on psychiatric treatment. All too often, historical 3D simulations are of quiet architectural models, empty of occupants, dismissing the role of people and their contribution to the research. Burchik and I understood the incredible importance of the occupants, both patients and physicians, to our study of Toptashi, and have been looking for a tool to research and visualize this. Through a Getty-sponsored workshop last summer, we had the opportunity to begin addressing the topic. We are currently in the process of developing an agent-based modeling tool within Unity 3D, initially developed at that workshop, that allows the simulation and study of people as agents within the space of the asylum. Gathered from primary document research, Burchik developed a deep understanding of the roles engaged in daily life at Toptashi. Likewise, she developed an understanding of the patient daily routines and the organizational method of fitting patients into wards based on their symptoms and perceived illnesses. Seen here is a diagram from her research of the asylum administration, outlining the various roles strictly codified within the asylum hierarchy. This knowledge, paired with patient routines, is an integral component in simulating the daily life of the asylum. Our system models the movement of both patients and physicians based on a series of attributes and rules. By programming each agent individually with this data, we can let the simulation and agents run autonomously, observing and recording the emergent behaviors, patterns, and spatial usage. Seen here are some of the conceptual framework that we developed. In plain language, what we're doing is we're telling each person once, at one point, where they go during the day, what their routine is, and then we get to stand back and observe and gain some insight from that. So there's some upfront work done to tell them what to do, and then they're autonomous at a certain point. We developed a file system that allowed us to generate many agents at once. So in this case, we have 10 agents being loaded from this one file. They're all female. They're in Block E, Ward 4, and they have an itinerary. At 7 a.m., they're going to the courtyard. Then at 7:15 to the dining hall, to the courtyard, back home to their bed, which is critical because that's where all the physician and patient interaction happened, or in the wards. So this is an example of how we initiate our agents within the system. Here we see two cohorts of agents, one, and let's call them capsules maybe. Those stand in, they're an abstraction for the agent bodies. We have red and blue agents that were built and programmed from two files, one file for all the blue, one for all of the red, so very efficient in how we're building these agents. Each agent knows its daily routine in that form of the timed itinerary, and each agent also knows which bed it belongs to, and we can see that here. We're observing in this slide the very start of the day as the agents are just beginning to relocate themselves from the ward to either the dining hall or the courtyard based on their individual schedules. And lastly, we have this, which is a CSV file. It contains data exported from our system from the agents. Because each agent is autonomous and individual, they can be testing and storing data throughout their day about interactions, movement, visibility, and patient-physician contact. It is from this data that we'll be working later this spring to test out the viability of these daily routines as we know them in the asylum. The goal here is to automate and distribute the gathering of useful data onto the agents, so we as the scholars can focus more on parsing and on visualizing and gathering insights from that data. And I want to mention, as with Spatio Scholar, that this system is not bespoke to our project. It's flexible and can load agents into any 3D spatial model. So we built it intentionally as a system to allow deeper scholarship beyond our project into agents in space. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leah Grice, and I'm a librarian here in the Lippmann Library. And I'm going to talk about a project that I did when I was at the Pratt Institute in the Museums and Digital Culture program as a graduate student. So it's a mobile app concept, which is essentially like a game-based museum guide, and it's called Masonic Mission. So museums are unique learning spaces. They offer visitors both a social and a physical context or space that's conducive to concept learning and engagement. Many game-based learning tools exist solely within the digital realm. However, museums are in a unique position to be able to offer the physical space for game-based pedagogy and materializing digital learning within the aura of the objects. Traditional multimedia museum guides, which navigate visitors through the exhibition space using traditional means, such as like multimedia video or audio recordings, game-based museum guides circulate the visitors through the space using a series of engaging tasks, facilitating concept learning and encouraging visitors to look more closely at the works on display. This encourages a mobile experience that is both heads-up and participatory. Games provide the visitors with an engaging learning environment that can be carefully structured, creating conditions conducive to both concept and informal learning experiences. Masonic Mission was a concept that was developed for the American Folk Art Museum's exhibition Mystery and Benevolence, and it was an exhibition about the history and the objects of ritual and Masonic orders in the United States, specifically the Freemasons and the Oddfellows. So this game is a mobile application that challenged visitors to progress through the 3 degrees, or progressive stages of advancement within the lodge, normally conferred using a ritual ceremony. Masonic rituals designed around the symbolic story of the history of the building of the Temple of Solomon. These 3 Masonic decrees are designed to represent the 3 stages of life: youth, which is the entered apprentice; manhood, which is the fellow craft; and age, which is the master mason. This is an important starting point for learning, as many of the objects on display in the exhibition had a context within these rituals, or represented areas of knowledge necessary for progression through the degrees. Using the degree ranking as a gameplay metaphor also helped visitors to understand the structure of the American fraternal orders. So for the first challenge, players must be initiated into the Freemasons, also known as the first degree. To obtain this degree, the player must prove their knowledge to the Masonry practices and emblems. The player must memorize a series of emblems, or its symbols, and correctly answer questions to be entered into the Brotherhood. Fraternal orders use these specific devices to aid memorizing and performing their duties in the society. One such device is called a tracing board that encodes the teachings and beliefs of the Freemasons. Similar to the intended purpose of the objects on display, the game gives players a typical fraternal theme that is represented in Masonic emblems, such as like death and virtue and wisdom. Using AR technology for image recognition and overlay, players must scan and collect 3 emblems related to a given theme for the curtains to lift and reveal to the players on the tracing board. I hope that makes sense. So that's the completion screen. You get a little certificate. And so for the second challenge, for the second degree challenge, players are invited to participate and oversee the rituals of the lodge in a 2-part challenge. For the first part of the challenge, players are given the image and must pair it with a specific object on display, and it's hidden within the image, and it's a way to illustrate the context and the object within its context. To complete the task, they have to take visual clues and then decide what object it is. This one, I think they were really into biblical recreations. It's for like fun. So this object was, in particular, this tablet was used for that. So that's the recreation. So after the players locate the corresponding object, they must read the didactic panel to answer the question, to demonstrate their understanding. So, and then for the second part of the challenge, the tables are reversed, and players are directed to an object within the exhibition, and they must illustrate its context using the drawing tool provided. This is a staff that was used for like hazing ceremonies. They had them ride mechanical goats. The Masons were really weird, by the way. So then they have to illustrate this scene, and that requires actually reading the panel. And then that's the certificate if they pass that challenge. And then the final one, the third degree, or the Master Mason, this degree represents old age and reflection, and it's for this reason that death and mortality are strong themes during this degree. So players must carefully examine a detail of an object that's on display and pair it with a relevant object, and they confirm that by scanning the object using AR technology. And then once they pass, then they get their face superimposed on a Freemason's portrait, and they can have it posted in the Grand Lodge or shared with their friends online.
Hi, so I'm rounding things up. Boy, I don't know, that's a tough act to follow. Mechanical goats, biblical recreations. Well, don't knock it until you haven't tried it, right? So I'm going to change my grading. So I'm Dr. Andrew Klobuchar, and I work in the Humanities department, and I want to show you essentially a writing tool that I've been working on with a programmer, David Eyre, and we've been working specifically with looking at ways to design an online platform that allows you to introduce applications and methodologies for working with NLP and writing practices. So quite quickly, the three things I want to, well, two things actually two main things that I want to look at is that there are two histories and discourses in the literary arts that are in play here. Very fascinated with NLP as a tool for text generation, text analysis, and what this tool does is gives you access to NLP processors to actually write and work with writing analytically on developing your own projects. So NLP is a tool for text generation, invites us to consider digital writing and reading practices. Essentially, I think it's core to the digital humanities here, that writing and reading is essentially being transformed by smarter writing machines. We are now not writing alone, but we're writing with the machines. The machines are helping us in many ways. How can we actually work more effectively, more directly with these machines? We can design them ourselves. We can actually produce the type of processors that we want to produce the types of writing that we want. And the second discourse here, the second history that I'm looking at is a long history, at least 70 years, that goes back into poetics and the literary arts. That poetry itself has been working with computation basically since computers became computers. You can trace some of the earliest experiments in literature and poetry back to the introduction of the Mark I. And this is a type of literary history that I also want to make available online. So what you do is you do have a public on-site library where you can share the processors that you've designed and used, and you also have your own personal libraries where you're experimenting, exploring different processors, different pattern generators that you've made in order to work on your own projects. We're working with processors, with patterns and lexicons that we develop ourselves. It's you and me together. And also what we've been doing, what I've been doing specifically, is I've been writing specific language packs. And in a way, we're actually kind of modeling this on the way music technologies and music, digital music resources have developed samples and sample packages. Well, instead of sample packages, we're actually developing literary writing packages that you can download and then use in your own projects. So it's a community-based platform. Again, it introduces you to a visual programming interface, very easy to use, a drag and drop interface to build your processors, then add conditional functions, again, using the same easy drag and drop editing tool. And it also gives you access to a JavaScript-based NLP API tool library that we have available so you can actually tweak the types of linguistic processes or features that you want to include. And as I said before, there are built-in language packs that you can download. Users are invited to explore the contemporary tools in computational literature, computational writing, design your own language packs, and there's built-in tutorials that, again, trace that literary history. Poets have been working with computers, as I said before, for at least 70 years. And of course, you can even go back even further if you consider working with computation. Also, writers working with symbolic logic and working with diagrammatic tools, as we've seen here with some of the archives and the visual interfaces that we've seen being developed here. So this is just an example of a language pack. This is one that's available now. You download it. You can work with a very specific history, a very early history of computer poetry, stretching from 1950 to 1970. You get widgets, so you get active interplay with the type of tools that were developed through that. We have at least 5 live examples that you can use, including Christopher Strackey's very early Manchester University computer love letter generator that he built in 1952. This is one of the earliest uses of algorithms to produce poetry. What he did is, I guess he was sort of waiting around for a specific task, and he decided to create these love letters through the processor, and then he handed them out to his fellow colleagues. Other examples include Theo Lutz, his stochastic texts, Brand Geisen, Claire Philippi, and Allison Knowles' A House of Dust, one of my favorite uses of algorithms in poetry. So that's basically it. I do have links to the current homepage that are available. Just loading here. So you can see logging in, what it's going to look like. This is live. This is ready to go. We're actually just putting the processors in, getting it ready. I'm going to be using it in classes that I teach in literature and algorithms. So if you're actually interested in looking at it more, I definitely ask you to get in touch with me, talk to me. We're looking for people to actually work with the tool, develop some of the processors with us. And we do have a beta version that if I had more time, I could show you some of the drag and drop measures, but we'll save that for our next Digital Humanities Showcase. Thanks very much.
Well, so Andrew was our last speaker. Thank you all very much. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you who came. Before, if you need to go somewhere, I know we're right at we're just actually a little past 4, but if you can stick around, please do. We're going to have a short Q&A session.
Regarding the built history of Newark, with the Dana Library, how does the Dana Library account for pre-photographic evidence of Newark's built history, and what kind of evidence does it rely on before photographs were a medium?
The question was about what visual resources are in Dana, correct? It's more than 600 maps already that going back to the 17th century. And very extensive, because that's how we started to support the curriculum of the School of Architecture. And now we are linking out, and to maintain the copyrights, we had our own students going around the city and taking photographs that can be published because we own copyrights. And we're also linking out to the collection of other institutions like New York Public Library. It's work in progress. There's recently added video recordings. We are adding student schoolwork, student project, written material, textual, so a variety of format that can handle. If you're interested, it's constantly, and I expect it to continue. So if you're interested.
My project, just really quick, we've always wanted to get a digital representation of the building that we're working around. How difficult was it to use Unity? I saw you had a dedicated Unity developer. So I guess is it not for just regular people to use, and would you recommend hiring someone, or is it something that people can kind of learn to use by themselves?
So in terms of like developing the solution requires like, you know, special scripts to be written. So that's why we have the developer. But past that, I, previously not being like Unity user, I am able to like import the model and like do everything myself. The other option is like, that's probably how you would be using it, is to like export it as like a WebGL or like a Windows application to navigate. So I guess it's not as easy to use, but it is very possible, and it's like I think the learning curve is not it's not really that hard in terms of depending on how you want to use it. Well,
something about Unity on my way out? Okay. So I was walking out the door and I heard Unity. So there's a C# API, which is super user-friendly. As someone who has done some programming in a few classes in my MFA, but no formal CS experience or degree, I've managed to pick it up, and there's an ecosystem of people sharing their code around, so it's a really viable platform for cobbling together bits and pieces of code from examples, and a very well-documented API. So for instance, when we're looking at that agent-based system, we're using Unity for all of its features of lighting and being able to, it knows how to move something from one place to another. All we need to do is choreograph, you know, where those targets are and kind of what the system is. So you're able to use a lot of the underlying kind of power of that software.
Are you planning to look at shrines predating Christianity for the previous religions of Rome, or are you focusing exclusively on Christian tradition?
So the historiographies, what historians have thought is that these shrines come out of traditional pre-Christian Roman religions. And so that was the first sort of thesis that we tested with the database. So the reason why historians have thought that is basically for formal reasons around the nature of the devotion and the structure of the shrines. But there's essentially no evidence for these shrines between the 3rd and the 13th century. And so by kind of assembling the database and showing in that one slide the kind of rate of persistence of the shrines, it doesn't suggest that that rate doesn't suggest that there's simply a natural decay of the shrines. It's actually just a break in the practice. And the practice, that's what's so interesting to me about the bell towers, is that it suggests a kind of way in which the practice reemerged in the city and began to spread throughout the city through a specific kind of set of social networks that were employing craftsmen who were working actually in these similar forms that then became this street ornamentation in the shrines. Make sense? Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you all so much for hanging out here and for joining us today. Thank you to Butch Echols too for putting all this together.